That's all right.
All right, today we're gonna roast some code. Jeff made a little baseball app, and we're just gonna clean it up and see if there's things to make better on it. This was requested, so these are the best days when I get to roast people's code on request. So I'm gonna go ahead and open this up.
I thought whenever we submitted something, that was a request for you to roast our code.
Arguably, but it's usually a little bit less enthusiastic about it than Jeff. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and go into, I'm just gonna do it in my grading folder. Whoops. And then I'm going to plug it in. Baseball. Oh, I don't have a good way of running this in. I'm gonna open this in VS Code. Normally, I've been trying to use a new text editor, but I'm not sure how to run it in Vim with a command. I guess I could use light server. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna show you a different way of running. Well, no, I'm just gonna do it the live server way because that's more of what y'all know. No, I'm gonna do it my way. I've been stubborn. I'm sorry. Decided that I need to be stubborn in order to learn this text editor properly. So I'm gonna be stubborn. Okay? So we're gonna go ahead and I might need to install light server. This is just what I use instead of live server, which is what y'all use in VS Code. So now I should be able to type in light server. And if I do this, boom, I have an app. So same thing. Cool. All right. So now when I throw a pitch, it looks like it's just kind of like tracking the game and stuff like that. Now I will admittedly say I don't know baseball well enough to roast whether or not this data is correct or working.
That's all right.
Don't
If you open the console, there's more like results in there.
Interesting. We're gonna kind of just look at the code first and go for some easy grabs because I noticed one when you were doing stuff. This. See this?
Yep.
See this?
See it.
That looks repetitive to me.
It
This
is.
looks like something we can clean. Also, something I like doing. Well, here's one thing I noticed is you've got a bunch of lets here and then consts here. I guess these don't change is probably why. Maybe organize them. It's not that big of a deal, but if they stay on the page forever, leave them there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where are we redefining strikes div? Let's see. Are we ever redefining it? I don't think you are. So since you're never redefining it, this is also really a const.
Yep.
And I'm going to look through
a lot of my lets are going to end up being consts. I don't know why I do that, but it's definitely something.
To me, it looks like all of these could be consts. Yep. But one thing I could do to make this increase my confidence in that statement is set up ESLint. The way I like to set up ESLint is, first of all, setting up this as a repository. So right now I have my package.json, and then now I could do npx ESLint. Actually, I need to install ESLint first. So I'll just do npm install ESLint. And then I'm going to do an npx ESLint init. And if I do this, it's just going to give me a template for setting stuff up. So I'm going to say, okay, we are going to check syntax and find problems. We're using arguably JavaScript modules, but not, well, actually, I'm going to redo that because I don't think we even are using that. So we're using none, using none of those, not TypeScript, browser, and our configuration file I'm just going to do in JavaScript, and let's install it now with npm. So now I'm going to do this, and what this should do is it should set up an ESLint file, which if I look up here, it's hidden, but if I show it, it's right there, ESLint RC. And all this is going to do is let me know if I accidentally fuck something up, particularly if I change any of these lets to consts and then I redefine it, that's going to let me know if I fuck that up. ESLint's pretty good at catching that. So doing this, and yeah. So now this is giving me some info as to what's bad. I could go for that stuff first, which is up at bat isn't doing anything. Now, my assumption is that this is something you were going to do later.
Correct.
So I'm going to delete it for now because I'm not grading that code because it doesn't do anything for right now, right? Yep. So I'm not going to roast something that's not even hooked up. Okay. So now let's start poking through more. So we fixed the consts. We have all of these could probably be consts too, if I had to guess.
Yep.
So let's do const for those. And then also, what else? One thing I like to do is this. I like to start this stuff with a $sign. So it just lets me know that this thing is an element on the page. So if I do that, boom. Now, I think that makes it clear what the difference is between like a JavaScript variable and like an element on the page JavaScript variable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I like that distinction when I'm writing code like this. I don't do this in React, but yeah. I think that's good. So let's go ahead. I tend to be partial to just write out the name button. I don't know. That's just me personally. I don't, maybe it's because I type fast, but I don't mind a couple extra letters in there. That's just me. It's not universally shared that that's good. I just am like that. So, I'm going to go ahead, do this. Strikes div, balls div. It seems like your convention here is a little inconsistent in the sense that like home score, you're not giving it the element type, but here you're calling it a button, a div, whatever. So maybe you want some consistency there.
Okay.
I do think that there's value to maybe giving it the element that it is, so that way you know what type of element you're messing with. But yeah, that was the first thing. The very, very first thing I noticed personally when I was looking at it was I saw that this and this are kind of like the same thing. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do this. We're going to say, I'm going to make an element just called redraw. And all that we're going to do is we're just going to redraw with some data. So for example, in here, I could pass in strikes. I could pass in balls. I could pass in runners on base. And I could pass in the inning. Where's that coming from? Inning equals 1. Oh, I shouldn't have renamed this one. And I am gonna rename this to what the heck? Oh, whoops. I was trying to do a code action. What I wanted was a reformat. We're gonna call this, instead of calling it $inning, I'm gonna call it current inning. I think that makes a lot more sense. And I'm gonna put it up with the other variables, right? So that way it's easier to track. And then we've got, full beans. And now what I could do is take all this code, dump it in here, boom, boom. And actually, it looks like there's different ways of doing this. We actually don't even need function arguments here, though, because it seems like what you're going to do is you're going to update those things, and then you just redraw, right? So in other words, now what I could do is, when I first load up my app, redraw. Which, by the way, if you ever want like startup stuff, something that can be nice that I enjoy is rather than just dumping it in the script, one thing you could do is actually do a document.add event listener. And what you could do is add a listener for DOM content loaded. And what this will do is it'll just make it really clear to the next person reading your code that the time when this occurs is when the document loads. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So now in here is where I can do all of my starting stuff. So in here, when we load, redraw. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let's just check to make sure everything's working. Like I changed a bunch of code. So I'm going to just do a light server. And we're going to check it out. And it looks like I fucked up something. So what did I fuck up? Assignment to a constant variable at reset count. Reset count. Oh. So we are doing stuff. Strikes and balls. So those are the only things it looks like change. Okay.
Yeah.
So let strikes, let balls. It seems like runners on base would change too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Okay. So runners on base. Whoops.
Outs is gonna change too.
What
Yeah.
is outs?
Out.
So let's take all this, and I think I'm going to dump this here. Not that it matters. Oh, wait, no, I have to dump it higher. It's fine. I do notice a problem, but okay, we'll figure it out. Where's outs? Outs. Okay. And this is kind of like our game state, is what I'm thinking.
Right.
Now, this, it looks like, is just different types of home runs. So
Right.
maybe what I'll do is I'll say, we're going to make that clearer by just saying, this thing is home run types. This thing is pitch types. This thing is, well, where are you using count?
In the throw pitch function, let me see.
I don't think you're actually using it.
I haven't wait, reset count. Yeah, I'm not using that yet.
I'm surprised
Well,
it's
wait
not.
a minute. Yeah, I'm not. No, I am. That is.
Nope. I
No,
don't
I'm
see
not
it.
using it. Silly me. No, I'm not using it.
That's okay. So we're just going to get rid of that. It also has a weird code smell because it's like a variable that depends on balls and strikes, but it won't automatically update or anything like that. You'd have to manually update it. So if you were to like make this a function called like announce count, and then you invoke it, now you could keep it fresh. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But we're not using it. Let's get rid of it. And we're going to call this zone types. Does that make sense?
It would be. I mean, originally I had. What did I have? I had in the zone as true or false. But that wasn't really working the way I wanted it to, so I just did it as an array of ball or strikes. Or
Cool.
ball or strike.
Important concept here, or strategy here with writing code. If something doesn't make sense anymore, you need to adjust the other code around it to make it make sense. So like
Okay.
if you have something like in the zone makes sense, calling it like a Boolean, right? That is it in the zone, right? Like that makes sense as a name for it. Second, you change it, change the name too. It's really easy to do. In VS Code, you just type in F2 and then you rename it. It renames it everywhere. So you don't need to go and sit down and like update in 5 places. VS Code will do the work for you. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool beans. Let's see. So now we've got all our elements. I don't necessarily think you need the comments here. I think it's obvious to someone who knows what they're doing. Current inning, I'm assuming changes, right?
Yes.
I don't actually have it changing anywhere. So that's probably a bug if I had to guess.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah, so I'm not
gotten
going to debug it, but again, the goal here is to just clean this up. So all we've really done is move stuff around, and I'm going to call this contact types. I'm assuming this also doesn't change, right? Already, this looks way cleaner to look at. Do you agree?
Yes.
And all I did was move some shit around, right? So that way it's just like logically kind of grouped. So start with that. I think that that's really important. Okay. This console log won't do anything. Oh, wait, no, your console log, never mind. Hit. So now I'd have to break through some code and start figuring stuff out. So let's see. Throw pitch. Pitch thrown equals pitch types, random. If you have this, math.floor.random, you could make a function for this. You could make a sample function. It's actually one that commonly exists in a lot of frameworks and stuff like that. So imagine you're doing this thing. right?
Yep.
Well, let's say we sample from an array. Now I'm going to replace pitch types with array, and I'm going to replace pitch types with array. Well, guess what? Now I can sample any array that I want just by calling sample pitch types,
Yeah. Okay.
right? Sample zone types. Now I get a random one. I use the word sample like instead of like get random or something like that because it's actually used in other libraries. Like sample is like a known kind of utility function name. But if you were to, but even if you didn't know that, you should have been able to recognize that you were doing the exact same logic twice and pulled it out. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy enough, right? Ball or strike equals strike. I would argue that ball or strike is not a great name. What would be a good way to fix this? Well, usually if it's two things, I don't know. I think it's fine. Okay, we'll leave that. I would argue that here though, usually when you have like array constants like these, it's like saying it could be one of these few values, right? So what's usually a good idea to handle those values is like a switch statement or something like that, because you know that there's a finite amount of things that it could be. So let's do, and you could do it for each type of thing. So let's see. Pitch thrown for a ball, balls plus plus, take your base. So what I would probably do here is say switch. Well, this is tough. It's not, there's going to be some messy logic in here unless you used something like pattern matching, which is really cool. And if you want, I could show it, but I don't think it's the right fit for this right now. Let's see. I like that you did this. Something I like doing more personally, just because I think it's easier to read. Rather than doing this, what I'll do is I'll do something more like this. Solo
Okay.
is solo. 2 run is 2 run. 3 run is 3 run. And grand slam is grand slam. So if you have something like this, what's really cool about it is that now, if you could take all these and kind of convert them like that, and actually, when I do this, if I'm thinking about it as an enum, I will actually opt. An enum is like when you have a constant of different options kind of thing. Don't stress too much about it. But what I will do sometimes for that kind of data is use a different naming convention. I will say home run types. And now I kind of have this enum. And what's cool about this is, let's do this with home run types. We'll do this with pitch types. And here we're just going to say, and really what I would, yeah, we're going to do this fastball. Change up. There's a good reason on why to do it this way. I'll show you in a second.
Okay.
Curveball. Slider. And we can get rid of this. So now I'm going to do a little hack, which is I'm going to rename this to the same thing as the other variable. So that way it winds up in the same place. It's still not going to be correct either way, but it will be good enough. And then here we're just going to say zone. Whoops. Rename zone. You should do one at a time. But the idea here is now what you could do is this was like a good idea in the sense that now you have contact index at 0, contact index at 3, contact index at 4. So it's correct and you don't have to rely on just guessing the correct string. But the problem with it is a couple of things. first of all, I don't know what contact zero is unless I go to that definition and read it, right? So contact comes from where? I don't know where that comes from.
Contact is, where did I have it?
Are we even using this?
It's at the very beginning of the, or it was at the very beginning of the made contact function. I don't know where it went.
Oh,
I declared it inside of that.
what did you declare it as? You want to just tell me? On this?
It was contact, let contact, but I mean,
Oh, sure.
and it's an array. Single, double, triple, hit by pitch, ground ball, and fly ball.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, do the same thing that I did before, and I'm just going to take this and say single goes to single, just to show you how much more readable it becomes. And to also, well, before we even do that, I want to show you a problem with having this thing as an array. Let's say 0 right now is single, right? And I have some logic for, handling a single contact, right? Then the next person comes into my code base and says, oh, we forgot to account for a case. The case that we forgot to account for, and since I know nothing about baseball, is a touchdown. Right? So let's say, oh yeah, we forgot to add a touchdown. Actually, that might be valuable in basketball, if you've ever seen that movie. I know, for example, Jim, you had a South Park background, so you should know what basketball is. And if you don't, go Google it and watch that movie. It's really stupid. And it's by the South Park people. Anyways, so let's say we add touchdown here. Well, guess what? Now contact 0 is no longer single. Contact 3 is no longer whatever it was before. All of these shifted and it's fucked up, right? So that order got fucked up. That's the other bad part. Let's see, in contrast, what happens if we take it and do what I was advocating for, which is, let's say, make this say single. Let's make this say double. Let's make this say triple. Let's make this say, I'll have to do it like this, hit by pitch.
I have a question about that in a minute.
Cool. Also, another thing I want to make clear, this is a really good use case for TypeScript, believe it or not. TypeScript can clean this up a shit ton using something called string literal unions. But first thing I'm going to do is, this is a constant, doesn't need to be a let. Why? Because it's just like options. And we're just going to highlight this thing and we're going to move it up here. And we're going to call it, you guessed it,
Contact
types. Right? Whoops. And one of the things that should start becoming clear is a lot of coding, if you're doing it right, is making your code boring, right? Like as wild as this sounds, I am taking my code and making it more boring by just cleaning it up, right? I want it to be boring. If it's not boring, then it's really hard to read. The more boring it is, the better, if that makes sense. Not necessarily. I mean, it depends on how you define boring. But does this make sense? Like, none of this stuff is like crazy, but it changes the readability so. And also, by the way, one of the things to note is when we're indexing these types, now sample won't work because it's no longer an array, but you can fix that really easily. So for example, you could do sample obj or something like that. And in here, you could say that the key index equals this, math.for, math.random. We'll say our keys equals, and here we're going to dump in an object. Our keys equals object dot, or keys obj. And I just broke my own thing. But actually that kind of makes sense because sometimes you don't want to actually use the object keyword. So, or I guess in here it should be fine. Call it object. And then my key index is going to equal that. And then we're going to do object indexed at keys indexed at my key index. If that was a little confusing, don't worry too much about it, but just know it's a way of doing the same thing as sample, but just on an object instead. Just to prove that to you, let's go. We're going to say well, first let's write this. Oh, identifier sample object has already been declared. Oh, whoops. I just need to do it in a different tab. Oh, wait, I guess I already have it then. So let's try this sample object, and then I can just dump in like one of those types. So let's try contact types. So sample object, contact types. Oops. Array is baseball. What? Not defined. Hang on a second. Oh, array.length. Whoops. This should be keys.length. That should do it. I'm surprised ESLint didn't scream at me, honestly. Anyways, now that I do this, let's try this again. And there we go. Now I'm getting like a random one. Make sense?
Yep.
So same idea. Just had to do it a little differently. But now what's really cool about this is now we can do dot single dot. And actually, let's fix this up. Equals sample object index at contact types, right? Or not index at, but we're gonna hit it. And actually, what I would do is call, like, again, just to make it more boring, we're gonna say, instead of calling this thing a hit, we're gonna call it the, guess what I'm gonna call it, Jeff?
Hit type.
Even better,
Type hit.
contact type.
Select type.
If you
Oh,
use the word contact
yes.
in here, we're just gonna use the word contact again here, right? Nice and easy, right? Because the reason why is you could come up with another variable called hit that means something else later on, right? So if we're gonna use contact type here, let's use contact type just to describe the variable, right? Does that make sense? Like, it seems super obvious, but little shit like this winds up making a big difference. So anyways, now I have a contact type, and now I can start. I'm not going to go through your logic super aggressively, but like you could see now, I can start going through this and thinking about each. Like, how much easier is it for me to look at this and say, oh, at contact types of 4, why am I incrementing runners on base? As opposed to, like, now, if I change this to, I don't know what 4 was, but I'm going to assume it was like, what was it? Runners
Triple.
on, what was it? Fly ball?
Triple.
Triple?
Yeah.
How much easier is that to read now? Like,
That's,
for the next person? It's like way easier, right? And then now if I'm debugging it, oh, should I reset count on triple? Now it's just a logic question, right? As opposed to like a tracing your code and figuring out what's what question. Does that make sense?
mhm.
So like that becomes nice. And then what you usually want to do when you're handling like something that could be one of 6 values, right? Let's say that contact types can be one of 6 values. And you're not handling one of those values, or you pass something in that's bad, what you probably actually want to do on default is throw an error. Throw new error. Unrecognized contact type. And we're just going to call it like whatever that variable is. And I probably should have done these as single quotes and these as template literals. And now what you're doing is you're adding some safety into your application. Because if as a developer you fuck up and you make it to where you accidentally call this made contact function, but the contact type that's generated here is somehow invalid, right? Now you get more information quickly by throwing that error. And you know exactly what piece of your code needs to be fixed. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that this is probably about as far as I'm willing to go on this.
Yeah, that's fine.
I will say with this, the tricky part about cleaning this, oh, this is an easy one. Redraw, right? Easy, easy grab. The tricky part about stuff like this is if you're depending on multiple variables. Like in this one, for example, we're handling one thing, and that's contact type. Here we kind of have to deal with nesting of multiple variables. Sometimes you're just going to have if statements that are a little bit ugly. That's okay. One thing to do to clean this up, though, if that's the case, is you can think about early returns. So here you have if and then else. So here you're saying if ball or strike equals strike, else do this. A good way of fixing this is you'll say if ball or strike does not equal strike, then do the stuff in the else statement, right?
Hmm.
And then the idea is you have to return early if you do this. Although that may not actually work with your logic flow. I'm gonna take that back. I'm not gonna touch this part of the code because I don't know how this stuff works. But just because I suck at baseball, I'm too lazy to get too into the nitty gritty. But it's worth trying to clean this up a little bit. It depends. I don't know. I haven't thought through the math enough to know how to clean that up exactly. But I mean, there's a lot to process here. So I'm probably just gonna leave it on that for now. My challenge is get this cleaned up as much as you can and see what it looks like in a day. Because I'm willing to bet you're gonna get this so much cleaner and you're gonna learn a lot in the process.
Yeah, that's why I'm doing it to, you know, obviously
Awesome.
practice. But yeah.
All right, code roasting